All right, everybody, this is Chris Cataldo with the Club Paradise podcast. Today, I'm interviewing a fellow podcaster, a man of the brew, a man of the hip hop, is Craig Thorn. Thank you for coming on today, man. I really appreciate it.
It is a pleasure, Chris. Thanks so much for having me, man. And honored to be the first guest on the podcast.
First guest on the podcast. That's it.
Oh.
Just like that. I appreciate it, man. I'm very happy to have a veteran podcaster on for my first one, just so, we know we're doing things right here, which I really appreciate.
Oh, yeah. You're killing it, brother.
Thank you, man. Thank you. So traditionally my podcast is more of like video essay based, where I've done, it's early on, but I've done a couple of video essay stuff and, breaking down albums and analysis. But today, I wanted to get a little more dynamic. Doing a podcast by yourself is fun, but it's kind of dry at times, So for me, it's good to have a guest on and be able just to like chop it up a little bit. Hell yeah. We connected and we were doing a little pre-interview stuff, and you're one of the hip hop guys, and for me, I just wanted just to build a base. For you, where did hip hop start for you? I find everyone kind of gets into it at some point. So was it an artist? Was it an event? Was it where did it pop off for you?
Strangely, it was, I think, probably 1990 or 91 with Criss Cross. Whenever they dropped, I always forget what year it was. If you want to really start it, then
okay.
I'm 42, so that would have been, if it was 91, it would have been like 10.
Right.
And then people at school, I think, showed me like Vanilla Ice, which was like, okay, cool. And then the real stuff. So that was like the pre stuff. But then my parents owned a toy store when we were kids, which is pretty damn convenient. And they ended up partnering up with people who owned other toy stores. So then they had a bunch of them together, and their kid, who was a little bit younger than me, but he showed me Snoop What's My Name in 93. And then that changed my life. I was playing guitar up until then. I always loved music. And then once he played that, I'm like, guitar, hell no. Like it was just all wrapped from there. And then it was just like, as you can imagine, in the 90s, there's no internet. I was living in Australia, Melbourne, Australia. So the other side of the world from where the culture was.
Right.
So the only way to get information was the Source magazine, which was like the main thing at the time. But we got it, I don't know, 3 months late. So you get the March one in June by the time it arrives. And it's about 3 to 4 times the cover price. Maybe it was $2.95 over in the US. And then in Australia, it would have been like $10, $15 or something.
Damn.
So that was one way to do it. Or you just went to the record store that had good buyers, and they would have import CDs, meaning albums that weren't given a local release in Australia. So then, a CD normally in Australia would have been like $25. So then the imports were like $40, $50 for one album. So then but then you go to the store, you're asked to listen to it first, or you rolled the dice and yeah.
And you just grab it and you see if it works out, right?
Yeah. Or sometimes you saw an ad in the Source, like TQ, his album, which had just turned 25, was called They Never Saw Me Come. It's still one of my favorite albums of all time. I just saw it in the Source. I'm like, that looks cool. And just bought it. And I was like,
just went for it.
other times I bought it and it hasn't turned out so well, but yeah.
It's a risk, I'm sure. It's a gamble.
It's a risk, but it wasn't easy just thinking about that. Like it was pretty tough to find out what else like was around. So like, you get Snoop and Doggy Style, and you're like, oh, Dr. Dre, oh, he has an album but came out the year before or whatever. So cool, let's go get that. And then, oh, Warren G's on here. Oh, he's got an album. And then, you know what I mean? Like that was, you had to just kind of.
You had to do the work. I mean, no one was handing it to you at that point, right?
Nope. And I didn't really have a mentor. The closest thing was this guy who was a year or two younger than me, who seemed to maybe have friends who showed him stuff where I didn't really have that. So then he was just kind of feeding me things for the first few years, or they'd tell me what to get. And like, boom, I'm just buying it. And you kind of just run from there. And eventually you meet people who show you more things. And
right. Kind of like build your style and your taste of stuff from there. And you kind of put together what you can, I guess.
Exactly. And this was even before, like, you'd like someone bought a cassette or bought a CD, you'd just dub it. Like were you around for that? Are you?
No. So for reference, I'm only 28. So for me, I have Take Care on the wall here. I bought Take Care as a CD back in 2011 or something like that when it came out. But that was like phasing out at that point. iTunes was becoming up big at that point. So like that was cool. But for me, I don't have like the experience of like going to the store on release day and, all the stuff that goes with it, unfortunately.
Gotcha. Okay. I don't know if I necessarily got the release day thing either because of where
Yeah, you were limited, right?
Pretty limited, but we used to have like the boom boxes, but God, it makes me sound old, but the boom box, 2 tape decks. And then like if someone had that, you have the blank tape in one and then that, and you literally
rip it over to the other. Yeah.
So, you do that, or you could Could you rip it? I think you could do the same from CD, because if we had one that had the CD player, and I think you could do the same thing from memory.
Right.
So it was all when burners came out, then you would burn it. But I didn't like that because I don't know. I always felt like I wanted to give back to the artist because I actually really, really, really care about hip hop, and I wanted to be like, well, if I'd rather pay for it. Right. And I like the experience of opening it up and like the smell, and you know, it's hard to take the CD off the first time, and you open the cover and there's a whole bunch of like notes, and like sometimes it's super artistic, or
you're seeing the cover art or like the alternate. Sometimes they have it patched in, and you'd see all the stuff, all the work that they put into that before, you know, you even listen to the music. You see how much these guys really put into their album. It's so cool.
Nobody does that anymore. You don't get that experience anymore.
No, it's a lost part of the cause, really.
Yeah, and I guess because there's no money in it, which I understand, because if people aren't paying for stuff like that, then why would they continue to put that energy into it? Maybe vinyl now is kind of a collector's thing, and maybe some CDs. I don't know.
Yeah, and now I see they're re-releasing vinyls a little bit, and they're marking them up. You'll see them at like Target and like in the $10 section. You know, like, you know, it's retro now. My wife has a old Victrola player. It's like that, and it's like, you know, it's cute. It's like a novelty, and it's expensive now, which is like silly, but
exactly. And even if you don't have good, like a great turntable, I got a pretty average one too that's got built-in speakers just to have. But like, if you don't have really good speakers, you don't get to like
you miss the whole experience of it properly. Right?
Yeah, and it's like, and it almost kind of like I don't use it as much as I should, because I just went buying, same what kind of you said, I just buy all the classics or the rebought. I got a bunch in Australia that I didn't ship over here, but I always find like, the sides end, now I got to go turn it off. Whereas like you're playing it on Spotify or something, it just runs it through. So the laziness is already kicking in.
Yeah. You know what? You know what's funny that you bring that up too? I have this like I have like a bunch of these like theories, right? Like things that just in my head. For me, I love Spotify. Like I'm on there, host my podcast there, all that stuff. But I've been using Spotify for years, and it almost isn't as fun to listen to music in a playlist. I talk about radio a lot because like when I was in middle school and high school, radio was like the most readily available place to listen to music. Like the DSPs weren't as cemented, if they were around at all. So, you know, it was still iTunes. We were still doing some ripping, stuff like that, BearShare, all the fun stuff. So for me, like the excitement of hearing a song that you knew and liked on the radio was like a lottery. It's like a gamble, you know, where like when I have like 1,000 songs on my playlist that I all love, but it lost some charm for me, and it still does. And even like songs that just have like radio edits where they would bleep out the words and stuff like that. Like a lot of songs I learned that way. And then I heard the explicit versions after, and I'm like, oh, I didn't even know that was the real thing because I just heard it on the radio, you know? So for me, even some songs I listen to now, I hear it in my head because I would just blast it on the radio as much as I could. So for me, it's like there's a romantic kind of thing to it of the experience. I guess that's the same experience you're just talking about with the physicality of vinyls, or cassettes or CDs. It's just like the experience of it is so different, you know, and it's so on demand. And we could talk about it a little bit later with the downloadable services and stuff like that. But it's just it's almost frustrating because I don't get it anymore. And then I know younger people, younger than me, and I'm not old, but they don't get that. You know, it's at their fingertips, unlimited. You know, it's just
that's a good point.
Different society to it.
Yeah, you're right. And I remember it just reminded me in that same period, like mid 90s, there was one radio station that had on a Friday night, it was the R&B show. And on the Saturday night, it was like the underground hip hop show. So I was like probably 15 or something. Right, and you'd have, you know, like 10 p.m. whatever, and I would have the tape on pause, like play, record, and pause. And as soon as you hear, oh, there's about to be something on, unpause. I'm like, yeah, cool, sick. And you let it play, and then you've got the guy talking over it or whatever. Yeah. And I made like 20, I think it was like 26 volumes of mixtapes, just picking songs over
just in real time. Yeah,
in real time for exactly what you're talking about. Fortunately, this was like it was called PBS. I guess it's like public radio type of thing.
Yeah,
so they had the cussing in it for the most part. So then you got the dirty version. That's how I heard like D'Angelo for the first time and stuff like that. And then I'm like, you discover new artists, and then I wrote it down in pen on the cover. So I'm having this whole mixtapes that I made slowly over time. Like you said, I never thought about it like that. Like it's a gamble. You never know what they're going to play this week. Or I remember them debuting California Love like in 95. When that came out, everyone was losing their minds over it.
That just changes the game, you know?
Yeah, because it was the fresh, you know, the out of jail record from Park, and it was just so crazy, and just experiencing that was like that was a good time. As annoying as it was, it's like the convenience has taken away anything special about it, which is make music content again. I think that's the biggest problem, which is actually, I think we're going to talk about that later. We can get to that.
Yeah, yeah. But you're 100% right. And so you being older than me and you being, to me, that 90s into the 2000s transition, I think that's probably where hip hop like changed the most, where hip hop really breaks the, it goes from just hip hop to like, hip hop or popular hip hop, right? Big transition, I'm sure. And you really got to live through it in a big way. I don't really get into hip hop in a big way until like 2007, 2008, just because like I'm the youngest of 4 boys, so I would just listen to what my brothers listened to for music, when I was younger. Just a natural thing. We had a family computer, and then my brother's music was on there, and then it trickled down effect, right? So you having kind of like seen it and lived through it, can you talk a little bit about like, I guess like the shifting points, where you saw like, whether it's like an event or an artist, or like where did you see hip hop? I mean, obviously hip hop changed a lot from the 90s into the 2000s, so you could start there and then so on and so forth. Like, where do you see like the big shifts for hip hop in general?
That's a good question. So the end of the 90s started with maybe like the Puff, the Bad Boy, the Jiggy area, the what do they always call it? The shiny suit era.
Yep,
so when they put the locks and all that stuff. So like I loved Mace. That Harlem World came out in 98, I believe. Like I was jammed. So I was listening to like grimy underground hip hop, like Mobb Deep and like, all like hard East Coast stuff. But also I loved all the West Coast stuff, but also like the more pop focus, because it was fun too.
Like the party music was probably hitting hard then, right? Yeah,
it was, and it was in a different way. And it's really funny. Quick aside, my girlfriend's cousin who works for our company, he's 25, and I showed him Mace on Thanksgiving, Canadian Thanksgiving this year, so 2 years ago, and we did our end of year wrap up podcast last night, and he said that was one of his biggest things of the year. He's just like, I just don't understand. Like I never heard this before, and like because I was playing it today. I'm playing it nonstop. I'm like.
You're welcome. Like
he was born when the album came out, and it was just a cool time. So then I was primed to be into kind of everything. And then as the 2000s came in, one thing that I think, this is just me as opposed to rap, but like in Australia, I was like one of no one listened to rap. Me and my brother and a few friends, and that was kind of it. It wasn't cool, and people would always give us shit a lot. We'd wear it on our sleeves. We'd go to shows and buy the T-shirt and wear it around, and people would always say stuff. And then when it started to, so we like, I felt protective over rap. I felt it's my thing.
It was yours.
My thing, right? In Australia, and I couldn't wait to get over here to experience it, in New York where you're at, and like, if in real life. So when it came to the 2000s and things became more popular, the thing that kind of like pissed me off, I guess, was like, say, when 50, I never really got into 50 Cent. I have no issue with it. I've been to the shows and stuff, but it wasn't really my thing. And that drew in that whole new crowd, and they annoyed me for some reason. I wasn't into it. So like, the 50 was probably one of the biggest artists, I think, to change the sound as far as on a mainstream level. Then after that would have been maybe like probably the crunk kind of era, which was not my thing either. That was definitely because it was more the southern stuff.
The southern crunk stuff. Yeah.
That was like in the 90s. I mean, I liked Outkast. I bought all Aquemini is one of my favorite albums of all time. So aside from Outkast, there wasn't that many southern, Scarface, Ghetto Boys, whatever, but not that many southern artists were really sort of, for me,
such a different thing. It was so different.
Culturally
like so
different.
Left field. Yeah.
So left field, sonically completely different. So the crunk stuff, and by the time the crunk stuff came out, I was kind of over the clubbing time.
Yeah.
So that had been 05, would have been like 24, something like that. So like I wouldn't have really been in that zone. So it wasn't like for me, but I feel like all of that time is when it started to become really mainstream. And then you had some great, which I didn't particularly like. I'm not saying it's bad, it just wasn't for me. Right. Then you got someone like Jay, who I followed from the beginning. I remember bought Reasonable Doubt on vinyl in 96 when that came out, and seeing him change. Like I didn't like volume 1 or volume 2 of in my lifetime. Volume 3 was cool, and then Dynasty was 2000. That was dope, and then Blueprint was after that. And that to me, which I know is going to be a bunch of this converse when sort of Kanye comes in, changing the sound. RZA was already doing the soul beats and stuff, but Kanye took it to another extreme. Just Blaze too. So like Jay was like a mainstream artist that didn't change how he rapped for the mainstream. Like he kept it like, even though he says he dumbed down his lyrics, I don't really think he did that much. Like it was still like,
it was never like up to where people said it was. I think people put Jay on this pedestal because for whatever reason, but I think that his simplicity is what a lot of people loved about his music, where like in somehow made his life relatable when he wasn't like, no one lives like Jay at the end of the day, so I understand where you're coming from there.
So it's like complexity whilst being simple, because I always found his lyricism was still like
Well, the entendres and stuff he runs are great. Absolutely.
Yeah. But he did keep it like he knew how to make a hit, and he knew how to speak to his core audience. So he was like a big part of it. And as that kind of changed, another artist that was big that I did not like at first was Wayne. And I was a music journalist from about 2000 or 2001 for, I don't know, 4 or 5 years. And I got sent, I always never liked any of the Cash Money stuff. And I got sent the 500 Degrees album from Wayne.
Okay.
And I was like, here we go. But I have because of having to review it, which maybe you're experiencing with this, but then you're choosing what you got to. I didn't always get to choose what I wrote about.
Right.
So I end up having to force myself. So I have a lot of patience, because I'm used to like, I'll put something on, and my stubbornness plus the patience, I just like, even if it's whack to me, I'm just going to sit through it, because I feel like I can't critique something unless I hear the whole thing.
100%. I get that.
I listened to Wayne. I was like, yo, this is fire. Like it was like that's when he got good. That was 2003. So that album 500 Degrees was crazy. And that was like a take on Juvenile's 400 Degrees, which I think came out the year before. Okay. And then I've been following Wayne closely ever since. So Wayne sort of, in my experience at least, spearheaded a lot of the mixtape era. There were obviously many other artists to do that, but I wasn't as exposed to that. Wayne was the big one for me. And then Carter 1 and 2. Carter 2, I think, is his best album still to this day. Okay. So Wayne kind of took it into like that was like the mid 2000s. Then of course Kanye was just running things as well. Once he sort of college dropout, February 10th, 2004. That was the first day I left Australia as well. And I remember bought that album at Sam Goody in Hawaii, like never left the country.
Pivotal day.
Yeah, man. It was a good, I'll never forget that day because of all of that. So and just the way that he sort of changed the game with every respective album after that. It was impeccable. So that would probably be the quickest summary of the way I saw that change. And I think it's like a mixed bag. Some of it for the better, some of it not. It was, in my opinion, though, it was probably easier to find better music then than now. And I think it's probably more from just the noise and the pollutants of just the sheer volume to dig through. It's like, it was a lot easier to find the gems then, even though there was probably just as much. Even if you look at the ratios, it was probably, that's not fair at all, because there wasn't as much music. There was probably more better music there, but not because it was a better time. It was just because there's just more stuff and everybody thinks they can rap now. I think that.
Yeah. I was going to get into this later, but that segues really well into the conversation of the DSPs and, Spotify and Apple Music and everything. Pretty much to the point of what you're saying, do you think that these forums has kind of like helped to hurt hip hop in that regard? Because the online mixtape, the physical mixtape game was big, and then the online mixtape game was very, very big in, say from like 2005 to like 2012 kind of era, where people were just dumping music on, but it wasn't dumping in a way where it was like still curated. Like there was still these, Dat Piffs and these certain websites that still curated the music to a certain degree, so that like, it's like you could get your name out there, but you just had to be good enough. And people had to be like word of mouthing your music. And if your stuff wasn't good, you just didn't get any, circulation. So do you think, can you kind of compare or contrast that between like the, all that noise now, like you're saying, versus, when you look back at some amazing mixtapes from, the late 2000s, how do you see that difference, kind of come across?
Yeah, for sure. One piece of context that a fellow, he used to be an artist, and I consider myself still, I haven't done anything for a bit, but I'm in like I'm chilling for a sec for the first time ever. But he doesn't make music anymore. And he said recently, and he like uses Facebook like a diary, and was always like talking. It was interesting to watch a peer talk it through, like his detaching himself from the outcomes of his music and stuff. And he was like, in 99, there was 10,000 artists active in the world. And in 2023, there's 10 million. So he's like, that's the context, right? He said the lake we were trying to cross had become an ocean in that time. So it's like, fellow artist friends, don't be hard on yourself if you don't make it. So with that context, the digital revolution was supposed to democratize music. And it's done the opposite, I think, particularly because the labels bought into Spotify. So to get on the editorial playlist is next to impossible for any popular genre. A friend told me recently that if you go other genres, maybe drum and bass or some other things like that, there's a higher chance, which may or may not be true, that he took. I don't know where he was getting that information from, but I'm like, okay, cool.
Right.
But if you're in hip hop, good luck getting on Rap Caviar, Hip Hop Central, any of those major playlists, unless you're making the same old music that everyone's doing, and unless you're on a major label or Scooter Braun manages you or something like that.
Yeah, you already have to have these things in place to even have a shot.
Exactly.
You can't just be plucked out of the masses and just throw it on there, just get exposure.
I mean, Spotify doesn't have good exposure in the first place. Like, there's no discoverability on Spotify. And I love Spotify. I use it all the time. But there's no method to, even like the hottest new stuff. There's no feed. There's nothing there to find music where, again, like old mixtape sites where, like, that's all you did. You'd go to these places just to find new music.
It wasn't a place for, like, the greatest hits. It was just new music.
And then it would cycle out because it would get big. It would go on to other places and live elsewhere. But there is no other, there's no, like, intermedium for these things to live anymore, which is unfortunate for young people that are trying to make music. There could be people out there that could be the next, Drake or Kid Cudi or whoever you want to make it, and it's tough to not see discoverability in that way. And the only way I really see it is just blowing up on TikTok for whatever reason. And I don't like it, but it seems like it's the only way, unfortunately, just to have a song that's catchy enough to get a 10-second clip on TikTok. So, it's frustrating, I guess. And I don't make music, So I must imagine for creatives like you, it must be difficult to see
that shift in the landscape,
It's made me
just really turn you off to the whole thing.
Yeah, man. I've that's why at this point, this is the first year since 2002 that I haven't released anything. No, not a single, not a video, no, nothing at all. I don't even know if I wrote a verse this year. And I don't even know, I don't know if I want to anymore. And it's the first time I'm talking. I got a mixtape that came out in 2004, so it's the 20th anniversary next year. So I've been talking with the producer of that. It was an original production, not like a jacked, like the mid 2000 style one. So he was the one who told me about the different genres landing on playlists. But so we're talking about doing something. Me and my brother are talking about finally doing a collab album. But I'm in the process of listening to my old stuff to get re-inspired. So with what you were saying in mind, I just feel like the only people who are getting you nailed it 100%. With what you said about DatPiff, because you could cruise on DatPiff, see what's new, play a couple of songs for 10 seconds. I'll download that tape. Cool. Let me check that out. Right. And you could be able to do that. You knew it was free and it was just like cool and fun to discover stuff, where now discovering is not fun because there's too much. Before there was a decent amount, but it wasn't an overload. Now it's like, it just feels like needle in a haystack type thing. It's just impossible to find anything good unless it's got a cosign. The TikTok thing is a real shame because it's now moved from an artist-based economy to a song-based economy. So nobody, even if it happened, say we got a 10-second clip blew up on TikTok, cool, but how much of that is going to translate to Spotify followers, to Instagram followers,
to anything,
coming to a show, buying merch, anything that's going to result in commerce. I don't think it does. There's very few that, say Armani White with that Billie Eilish song, he did really well.
Right. But even if you do blow up, the options to grow from it is still few and far between. You get 100 million views on TikTok, but that's great. But if no one's listening to your song, like you said, if no one's doing all the other stuff after that, then it's almost useless.
The only positive, exactly, and the only positive thing I could think of as you were saying that was, say you do get that 100 million views and you get signed, because now labels, like you said before, they're not plucking people out of obscurity or going to a talent show or going
showcases, none of that.
Nothing, right? That's basically dead. I imagine it exists, but to a very small degree. So then the label is going to be like, oh, the Billie Eilish guy, let's sign him because he's popping already on TikTok.
Right.
So
he's already kind of proved his cause a little bit. He didn't even need nurturing or growth. They're just kind of he's got enough to we can market it, so we're just going to work on him. That's a little bit.
But do they work on it? Because it feels like that they want you to do the work as an artist. Yeah. I don't know the answer to that. It was kind of rhetorical. I don't know how much money the label's going to put into you to get you where you need to be, to make sure your money's right, to make sure that you're a great performer,
right?
That you have the team around you, you're a good manager, a good agent, a good lawyer, all that stuff to be successful in music. So I don't think they set anybody up for success, and they only want to sign viral people. So then now it's like a race to the bottom, and you're getting, I don't want to call anybody out, but you look around and see who's popping, and you're like, oh, okay, that's what the kids are into right now, eh? Okay,
right.
And each to the, I don't know. It's very different, even not even comparing to the 90s, like the era we were talking about, the 2000s and even
Right.
the 2010s. Like it's very different now, and it's just gone downhill like quick. So it feels now the chances of being successful before were pretty slim. The chances of being successful now are, to be honest, if you're doing music now and you're really serious about it, like, I don't know, bro. I don't know how much I would recommend anybody do that unless you've got mad connections, or like your music is so undeniably fire that nobody on this planet could question it. Like, good luck. All you're going to be the 6ix9ine character, where you're going to do some crazy shit on it.
Yeah, it's all the extra stuff then that's going to separate you, which isn't about the music.
It's not about it.
You don't sign up to be a clown. You sign up to be an artist, and then you have to be a clown to get the attention. When I say clown, like performing and being...
Yeah, like the character, or you're putting on a character, and you're on social media, you're doing all these things that's got nothing to do with your music, but you're getting like exposure for it.
Exactly.
That's not
good
what it's about.
exposure. It's like, oh, look at this guy. He went up and did this in the mall or something. Like,
It ends up being like no press is bad press, but it's still bad, you know? If you have integrity as a person, you know, then that stuff probably will impede that. You know, I'm not going to be a long life listener of that person. So like,
thank you.
Maybe like a short spike, you know, at best.
So then what are you going to do? Most people who get, this is something that we talk about on our social media agency side, like always, like if people always want virality, but 99% of people aren't equipped to handle what happens with that increase in attention. So you go get a song that goes viral and you're just someone in their bedroom making music and you get lucky.
Right.
What are you going to do? You don't know anyone in the industry. You don't have a manager. And then all of a sudden, all these people are going to be coming at you, and you got to try and determine who's snakes and who is going to actually help you.
Exactly.
And like, you know, people aren't equipped for any of this stuff. Even if you're just a YouTuber and you blow up on YouTube, you're not going to know what to do unless you've got all the ducks in a row as such. So like nothing is equipped for the artists are like, what's the word? Commodities. Like it's nothing. Like the artists are meaningless to most of these corporations, and to people it's just like cogs in the machine. So it's like, and now people don't even care about the artist anymore. And if they like one song, are they even going to check your album? Or if you blow up on one song, you go, hey, you've got a month to do an album. Like, bro, I've never done an album before.
Right. I think that's a great point too, like the idea of like the fandom of what it's like to have an artist, because like you said, like just hip hop as a genre was your own, you know, like, and no one does that anymore with the genre. And I think nobody, or not enough people, and nobody does that with like artists in the same way anymore. Like me, like I've always been a fan of Drake. Like he's been just a part, like his soundtrack has been soundtrack of my life going, you know, ever since I started listening. So no one has like the culture of fandom in the same way, it seems to me. You know, like no one talks about music like there's love for it anymore. Like there's no love in the process. Like again, even me, I love Drake, but the last 4 albums he made, I don't listen to them at all. Like I'm not interested because they're not made the same way he made his old music. And I like his old music because it's his old music. Like now he's just automatic, year and a half, he's putting out music. It's, you know, supplementing his fame and his presence and his relevance. But you know, he's also targeting a different demographic now. You know, I'm 28. I'm phasing out of the popular demographic. You know, the 13 to 18, the 18 to 24. I'm not there anymore. So maybe I'm phasing out because of that, or the sound, or whatever. It's hard to understand why I don't like it, because he's in core he's still the same, but he's just changing his style. So it's hard to account for it. But I like being a fan and having fandom, and like this is my guy. Like, you know, I can criticize him, but he's my guy. You know, I've always been his guy. Of genuine, yeah. You can do better than this for me, you know? Like, I've been on your bandwagon. You know, like once upon a time, it was hard to be a Drake fan. You know, people forget that. You had to like make your case for this guy because he was soft and Canadian and this and that. Like you had to be like, no, like, but it's on the radio and you like it too. And like, so what are you supposed to say? So you had to like convince people that he was okay to listen to. Now he's just like global superstar, and he's everywhere, and the album drops, he breaks records even when it's not a good album. Like, it's just so different. It's like frustrating to such a huge degree, you know?
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that lack of fandom thing. That's just a good point, because that was what, when things were physical media, you had that one CD or that one tape or out of vinyl, and you listened to that back to front over and over and over, and you knew all the words, and you knew everything about. I knew like every label that they were all on because I read the covers and I knew who produced what. So,
exactly.
like, I could go on Jeopardy or whatever. Like, I had so much knowledge because just from reading the magazines and stuff.
Just passively soaking it up. That's it.
Soaking it up. Well, it wasn't even passive. It was very proactive, but there wasn't that much. And it was easy because I'm like, oh, Mary J. Blige, that's my girl, like Brandy or like Aaliyah, then, you know, like whatever, all the Woo Cats and Nas and all these different people that I just like loved. You just knew everything about them. And now it's like Drake is probably the last ever superstar, I think. I don't know if there's going to be another one because of the way things work. And it's not that there's not anybody that's capable probably, but I just don't think the way the systems around it are set up, I don't think anyone's ever going to match what he's become. And what you said, whether you put out, and I agree wholeheartedly, and my co-host, the 25-year-old, my girlfriend's cousin on my other pod, is a passionate Drake stan. It doesn't matter what he does, as Jake can do no wrong. And we have aggressive disagreements about the last few albums. But it's coming from a place of like me and my brother can't stand it. But I'm like, no, like we were there from comeback season, bro. Like 08, like
the real deal, like the
original
core of it.
Yeah, I remember my friend, I was still in Melbourne. We moved in 2010, so we're still in Melbourne. And my friend in Atlanta, who was like a DJ working with our crew, he told me about Drake. And I was like, okay. Sure. Didn't know who he was, nothing. And I listened to Comeback Season. I was like, oh, like the music, he sounds like Kanye. And because Ye was our GOAT. I was like, oh, this is sick. And we just listened to it. And the fun story I wanted to tell you, and I unfortunately have no proof of this. I cannot find the proof, but on my mind. So you're going to have to take my word from this. And I almost feel like I've gaslit myself into thinking like, did this happen?
Did I make this up?
Yeah, I really don't think so. But I swear on everything, the MySpace was massive at the time. And Drake had MySpace page. And on the MySpace page was an email address. It was talk2drake@gmail.com. So I emailed. And at the time, this was our window. You know, kids in Australia rapping. We're like, yo, we can work with these American rappers now, finally, and just pay them a few $100 and get a verse. So we worked with a whole bunch of like dudes, like my brother worked with Sky Zoo, like dudes from like the Justice League crew, Shandon and Emilio Rojas, and different people that Rascas and things like that. And so I reached out to Drake because I liked him. Did not know about Degrassi, no clue. But I watched Degrassi in the 80s because we had the original Degrassi.
The original, it was a reboot.
They just had it syndicated on TV there. So we watched it in real time, I believe, anyway. But didn't know he was on the new version. So I reached out and was like, yo, hey, this is who we are. Love to get a verse from Drake. Someone responded, and it must have been his manager, or could have been him posing as the manager. I don't know where he was at the time. Sure. And they asked for $2,000 for a verse. And I'm like, $2,000, bro. Get out of here.
For one mixtape, dude. Come on.
Fuck, bro. Biggest mistake of my life. So I look for that email everywhere. And I might have, like, it's not in my old Hotmail. It didn't get pushed across to my Gmail. It's not.
Oh, my God.
And now MySpace has kind of, like, got everything erased and then brought back. So there's no proof of any message history. So I have no way to prove that. But I wish, obviously, that would have been the gift that kept on giving.
I mean, that would have been a good return on investment, but, you know, listen, at that point, I wouldn't have spent it either, man. I mean, $2,000 then is still more than what it is now, but I don't know. It was still a gamble. Just one mixtape that had 2 good songs on it. It's not easy.
No, it was a lot, but I forgot about how hard it was to be a Drake fan, sort of all of those times. But I mean, like, I wasn't pushing it on people. I felt like So Far Gone kind of, you know, Once Best I Ever Had blew up. It was pretty quick from when we heard him, and then So Far Gone came out the next year, and then Best Ever, and then Kanye did the video and blah blah blah.
Yeah, it was quick.
It was quick succession. Quick. Even then,
that's fast.
Yeah,
because you look at it in. This is a good segue too, as we're talking about Kanye and Drake together.
Yeah,
you know, we can get into the Kanye Drake talk in general because it's one I think that's where the conversation ends up going anyway for the best rapper and stuff like that, because there's so many things that go into it. But you look at projects like Room for Improvement and Comeback Season. You look at them, you're like, they're raw, but they definitely, even then, I think he's drawing a lot of inspiration from a young Kanye, as he's already by 07 he's got, you know, almost his whole trilogy's out by the time 07 comes around. So you forget that's shifted a little forward. I forget sometimes he shifted a little forward in that way. And then he gets those mixtapes out, and then 09 is So Far Gone.
Yeah.
You know, what's it like seeing so much of Kanye in that early Drake? Because to me, that's some of the best. Like for me, Drake is like So Far Gone, Thank Me Later, Take Care window is like, insanity.
Like
Money, Drake.
It's so ridiculous. Like that's prime time. Even I Love Nothing was the same, but it's a little different. But that little capsule of Drake, I mean, it's just like, to me, that's even a higher high than what he's at now, because the highs weren't as high. You know, it was all relative. So what's it like for you being, you know, being a Kanye fan and then seeing Drake draw so much inspiration? You know, what was that like in real time, and how does that make you think about Drake even today, you know, as an artist?
I loved it. I never thought it was a bad thing at all. Because Kanye was, when we discovered him, it was probably '02. So he, through leaks, he was leaking a lot of the original College Dropout, and he was doing these little freestyles and stuff. And that's when we were making the project that's 20 years next year called Soul District that we did. That was where those studio sessions, and Kanye literally inspired everything I've ever made from back then, because that's how impactful it was, both the music side from the production and both the rapping, because I never heard anyone rap like that. So I don't think he immediately had I think people doubted him even when he came out, like mad people doubted him. So I don't know, it just clicked for me at the time. And I never heard that conversational, like funny and kind of cocky and like just great bars like in these raps with telling these cool stories. I'm like, all right, well, this is really unique. So there wasn't that many other people that did that. The closest was Hezekiah from Philadelphia, who I'd worked with and kind of become friends with in the meantime. I got sent his album called I Predict a Riot, and I was like, oh, this guy sounds like Kanye, the same thing. So hearing Drake do that, that's what drew me to him immediately, as far as like musically, just like, oh, all right, he's telling these stories. I would also add in there, Bufonte from Little Brother would probably be one of his other biggest influences as far as the rapping style. It just made him interesting to me because it wasn't polluted with a million Kanye wannabes. So when there was somebody that did stand out, that got some attention, it was like sick. And he did it well. He executed well. And he wasn't even singing at the time, if I'm not mistaken, on Comeback Season.
No, on the mixtapes, he was not singing as much. He picks up.
Yeah, he picks up the singing on So Far, because he go bars heavy on the mixtapes, and then he started singing more in So Far Gone, and that's what I think really propelled him, because nobody was singing and rapping in that way at that time. So it's like I think he took what Kanye had, that levity that he had and lightness to his music while still storytelling, and then he added in some of that R&B singing on top of that with some bars. It's just like, it was like a time that really melded together really well, and I think he just kind of took it and did a little bit better, different and better, I'd say. But, you know, Kanye's still Kanye. So you can't like shortchange him for anything he contributed. So that's a ridiculous thing to say.
No, not at all. It was cool. I mean, that's why it's extra shame to see him beef, because it was cool to see the Larry Hoover show and stuff like that.
Oh, it was awesome.
But it sounded like, if you look at the raps, and maybe that was fake from Drake's side, at least.
It could have been.
Chill. He said he made an allusion to that on, what song was it? Talking about the Jay Prince apologies or something.
Yeah.
I think it was on For All the Dogs, he said.
I can't even keep up anymore because it's just back and forth nonsense.
Like, I'm not interested in that, you know? I don't like
just do it. Just be friends. Like, you guys like have all this history, and, you know, even like the Kid Cudi with Kanye too, like they just got, you know, together again as like collaborators, and like that's great. You know, I want Cudi to be great again. He hasn't been great for a long time, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And it's like, like you guys, like no one, I don't think anyone cares about beefs the way they used to. Like, it used to be a bigger part of hip hop in a different way as well. But like now, like I don't, like no one's like happy about the beefs. No one like really cares. Like, we want good music. Like, give us more. You know, like,
they're grown men. Like Kanye as well, like 46 or something, and Drake's like nearly coming up on 40. Like, come on, boys.
He's
like,
40. Yeah.
And we know Kanye's got his problems and things he deals with, which I give grace to. Honestly, at the end of the day, it is what it is. It's just a situation that we're in, but it sucks that the music suffers because of it. You know, and I'm skeptical of the Ty Dolla $ign collaboration. Like, the hype's there, but I don't think it's going to be there like anything else. And I don't know. It's a dicey spot with that, you know?
It's always been like that with Kanye, at least the more recent Kanye. Back in the day, there wasn't like so many scrapped projects. And maybe it's as he got, you know, larger and larger and larger that he started maybe wiling out more. And that's what happens. I heard Rogan and Shane Gillis were talking about it on the pod. I'm listening to it now. And they were saying, I saw a clip and they were saying like when you look at someone like Kanye, you kind of got to expect he's going to say some wild shit. He's going to do some crazy things. He's going to change his mind abruptly and stuff, because that's what creative geniuses sort of do. So Drake has a little bit more calmness, I guess, probably because he's still some sort of a creative genius, but maybe not quite in the same way. Yeah. So it's like he's able to maybe keep his act together.
Yeah, because his commercial viability and his marketing is more important to him. Like that, his status of what he does is now surpassed, the type of music he makes. Like he's not really interested in being, putting out a Grammy award-winning project anymore. He just wants to make music, which is fine. I think you deserve that at a certain point in your career. But
For sure.
For me, it's also like, I have this other theory, which really isn't a theory. A lot of people have talked about it, where, the career of artists, they kind of go up and down with their how much effort they put in, and they're hungrier. When an artist is the hungriest, they tend to make their best projects, their most hard-hitting projects, the most long-lasting projects. So no matter what, they hit this peak, and then then they're up here, and then they plateau a bit, and sometimes they drop off, they go up a little bit, whatever. But I think if you look at most artists, I love that era of hungriness. I love when they're trying to pay the rent. They're trying to make something. They're trying to win the Grammy, even though a lot of artists don't support the Grammys in the same way anymore.
No.
But that was like the goal for so many people for so long. That like I love that. Like they like it's like they're trying so hard, and you can hear it in the verses. And I miss that. I miss that in a lot of music now. And it's like everyone's like sit back, relax, like I'm still the coolest guy ever. It's kind of like going back to what it was, where where everyone just kind of like, this is me, like I'm just doing my thing, like it or don't. It's like no one's trying anymore in the same capacity, I think.
Do you remember, I agree wholeheartedly with everything there. Do you remember when it wasn't like, there was a bit of a period, and I can't really put my finger on when, within the last decade, where it was like people were just like, oh, I'm not a rapper, but they make rap. They're rappers, are making rap music, but they proactively tried to distance themselves from rapping. Is that familiar? I can't think of an example, unfortunately, right now, but I remember it happening a bunch. And it was,
sure.
I guess, to try and sort of say like they're so cool that they don't have to try because they just make music. But I'm not a rapper, bro. I'm not.
Like they don't even have to like associate with a genre or group, because that I'm just making music. Wherever it takes me. It's fine. Like no, you need a plan. You need drive. You need
They
need to align yourself with something.
I just walk in the studio, bro. I don't write it down. The whole Jay and Wayne thing, not writing down, fucked up a whole lot of people.
A lot of people need to write their stuff down.
Not everyone is making the whack. One thing on that hunger, though, I think For All the Dogs was Drake's worst album in a long time. And that's what I've been arguing a lot about on our pod. But the backlash from that generated Scary Hours 3, which is one of my favorite projects from him in years. And Evil Ways is is probably my favorite song of the year.
Right.
Spectacular, in my opinion. I've always liked Cole since about the same time I got into Cole in 09 with Lights Please on the come up, one of those tapes. So like hearing them back to back up, it was so fire. But it's interesting that I agree wholeheartedly about Drake maybe being an autopilot, and it's become content and not this like high level art that he's really trying to sort of excel at. But then the pushback, and then the ego hit, and be like, oh, you think I can't rap no more? Okay, watch. And then he goes and does it.
And hits you on the back end with it. And it's like,
exactly.
Is that what it takes though? Like we have to like assault you on it to be able to push you into something that we want? Like it's just not what I'm used to,
Yeah, it's not, I'm not saying it's okay, but that is one maybe
good response.
Yeah, it's like an outlier in that trajectory that you're talking about. Because almost every artist goes through it to some degree. Yeah, or at least say look at Kanye, like as he's gone on. I'd say you mentioned when we over email that you kind of stopped maybe paying a lot of attention to Kanye around Yeezus, which is fair because that was a jarring album at the time. I haven't really reflected on that one too much, but say Jesus is King, hated it at the beginning. Now it's top 3 for me. I love it. And I'm very not religious at all, but
But his music changed so much at that time. And I guess I struggle with that because I am a mainstream guy. I'll say it. That's okay. Like I love radio hits, love all that stuff, So like at that time, I knew Kanye for one thing, and I thought that was just like, and his thing just changed so fast. And Yeezus was like a half step, and then Life of Pablo and Jesus is King, like those came on. It was like, oh, this thing's way out in left field. Like what a different thing, right? And I probably struggle with that in general. Is like I just expect one thing and I'm getting another. And I think the older I get, the better I can be at, like you said, like you can sit with an album, you can go through it. You got to listen to it to be able to say whether it's good or bad. You can't just say it's bad because you hear the one single off of it and then you don't give it its due diligence. Like the older I'm getting, the more I'm appreciating that fact and understanding it. It's a hard thing because my patience is probably one of my things that I like, sometimes I don't like wait in lines well, like it just kills me. So I try my best. So like the older I'm getting, and now that I'm, doing this podcast and I'm going to be, the Drake stuff's going to dry up eventually. I know I'm going to have to get into other artists in a heavy way. So that'll be, I think, a fun experiment for me to be able to analyze and be able to, you know, dive into stuff that like this year I fired up Channel Orange, and I'm like, I knew Channel Orange for Frank Ocean, great, it's a great album, and I always knew it was a great album, but I fired it up this year for the first time in a long time, and I'm like, oh my God, like what a piece of like work, like it's art. And you know, it's I think it's 10 years was this year, that's why I think I listened to it.
That might have been 2013.
We moved to Montreal in 2012 and my girlfriend played it non-stop all year,
right?
So that's the only reason I know it was 2012.
Okay, so it's time for that revisit, right? You know, you get at least 10 years and you give it a solid revisit, and it was always critically acclaimed. I knew it was a good piece of work, and I never gave it its due diligence. And it's like, why? Well, you get mad almost. You're like, why didn't I get into it sooner? You know, it's like, why couldn't I have like just given it the 45 minutes it needed previously? And so for me, I'm excited for that part of my journey where I start seeing that more and more. And then I went back, listened to Blonde, and Blonde's another phenomenal album. And and it's like, I'm missing out. So like, I'm the only one that's suffering for not listening. And even if I don't love it, then, you know, I can be better for it at the end of the day.
Sometimes I'm not ready for stuff. Like I hated Channel Orange when it first came out. I thought it was just weird and jarring and stuff. And then as my girlfriend played it on repeat when we moved, so like you're doing this unpacking for ages and like just consistently playing. So to me, it's time stamped at that time of life. Yeah. And whilst now I'm kind of like a little tired of it because of the volume that she played it at, but I can absolutely reckon like Pink Matter is one of like the most brilliant songs of all time with 3K's verses and stuff. And I wasn't ready for it in 2012. But then say Nostalgia Ultra, which I think might've been the year before, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, it was right before. It was very close before.
Okay, perfect. And that hit me right away. That was more immediate because it was more straight up and down. It was like his take on like the American Wedding, the Hotel California and stuff like that. And that was like these cool stories. I'm like, oh, wow, this is like really creative. And, you know, now that he's like the D'Angelo of the era, whereas he's released 2 projects ever, essentially, if you don't count the other, you know. So it's sometimes you're just not ready, but I'm excited for you because you're in a cool time of life where you've had like the early 20s and stuff, say on your Drake era that you mentioned, like that would have been really influential for you, obviously, and very like imprinted on you. Yeah. But then, like you said, and I'm happy to hear that a podcast is currently focused on Drake is you and I seem to share the same sentiment as far as the last few albums. CLB, we revisited it this last week. Yeah. Still mid.
Incredibly mid. Yeah.
That's you know, the hard part. All the dogs mid as fuck. Honestly, never mind. That grew on me. That was a weird one. I hated it at first. And then like, I don't know. It just like, I found like it's just weird. I think that's going to be his Jesus is King, where like you listen to that in 5 years time, you'll be like, whoa, this is ahead of its time.
Yeah, I could see it.
You know what I mean? I can see it. It's just for me with I struggle like how perfect what you said before, how you struggled with the Southern rap then in the early 2000s. I think that the mumble rap is what I'll call it, that dominates a lot of music now, between, you know, Travis Scott, Playboi Carti, and all these like newer wave guys that I'm just not into. I can't get into that style of it started as Southern rap, I think, in this newer era, and is now turned, again, what I call mumble rap, is now come up again and is in the mainstream, and I'm struggling with it as a part of the genre. Like I just, because I'm so used to like a poppy, Tony kind of popular music in hip hop, and even like, for the most part, but even looking like my Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy is like a very altering album, but I adore that album, and we can get into it because that is like, it's creatively challenging. It's, you know, a new sound. It's a good sound. There's a couple pop songs on there. It's like everything it needs to be, and that's why it's the best album of the 2010s and so on and so forth. So for me, I just struggle with getting into new music in a big way, and I don't know if I'm the only one with that. And
I'm with you. No, I'm with you on that. Don't worry. It's weird.
What can you attribute that to other than it's just like I don't want to be like times are changing. There's no fun in that. You know, I don't want to admit it to myself that that's the case. You know?
You're getting older too. Then we're all like, I worry about that because I feel in my head I'm 21 type shit. I'm just like, how the hell am I in my 40s now? And I don't want to sound like the old man, but I was telling, once again, I keep bringing up, his name's Dan, the 25-year-old. Okay. I was like, bro, in the 2000s, like the era we're talking about earlier, in 03, 04, 05, like I'm like, man, look at these old cats, all the old heads in Australia. Oh, nah, man, hip hop has to sound like this. I'm like, shut up. I'm listening to Lil Wayne, bro. Like, so I want that new guy to be like, yo, move with the times. Yeah. There's a difference. the 90s to the 2000s, and then say even the 2010s to now, like something's changed in a different way. And I can't get into the mumble rap either. There's a bunch of it I don't mind, but I'm not going to be like, hey, yo, bro, throw on Migos, throw on Future. Like, it's not happening.
Never.
Excuse me, it's never. There's a certain way, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. If you happen to like hip hop or rap music a certain way where people say full words and you know, it's not complete nonsense and there's
tell
some
a story and you can understand it.
You know, I don't think that's too much to ask for, bro. Like the bar was already kind of low, and it's just been. I think I said it before. It's like a race to the bottom. Like music.
I think we're bottoming out right now.
Everything is
bottoming. That's a great way to say it.
And it's like everything's become content. That's the problem. Everything is content. So it's gone beyond social media. Music is content, YouTube videos, Netflix shows and stuff. Everything has no effort or energy or high art to it. Now, not that everything has to be this crazy, My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy level perfection, but
I'd rather everything wasn't that way. But don't get me wrong. But somewhere in the middle is nice, you know?
That's what I'm saying. Like, it doesn't.
It's not a lot to ask.
Try a little bit, but then I think there's that thing where like I think it's this whole complicated thing where like the labels have control. Maybe someone did it one time, the label's like, oh, that's stupid, that'll sell, cool, let's push that. Then more people hear that, I'm like, oh, that's what they're doing, cool, I'm gonna do that. And then they just keep pushing it, self-perpetuates, and then becomes this sort of sound that people get used to by sheer exposure volume. Like you go to the club, they're playing it. You go in the car, listen to the radio, they're playing it. You go to the mall, they're playing it. And all of a sudden you go in the airport, it doesn't matter where you are, you're hearing this stuff and you just think that's the norm. And then, oh, that's what it is. Then you're a new kid and you want to decide you want to make music. And then what are you going to do? You're going to make that same style of stuff.
Yeah.
If you're imagine you're 15 now and you've only grown up and that's all you know, and maybe they know the newer era Drake, but they don't know College Dropout. They don't know like that music can sound.
They need to know, and that's a part of what I'm doing on my channel right now is just making sure like there's this whole chunk of stuff that people are missing. You know, like everyone thinks they know Drake and hip hop in general. Like there's so much good music that came out, say 05 to 15, call it. That's an incredible stretch of music, and I think it just doesn't get its due diligence. You know, like no one talks about like the Eminems anymore and like what he did for hip hop and like how he doesn't get appreciated at all for how much of his contributions of what he did. And even like Jay-Z, no one talks about Jay-Z anymore either. And he just laid the bricks for Kanye to run and for all these guys to do all these different things. I think without beating a dead horse, it's like just hip hop history is like, it's not, that's coming to a thing as well, where now like there's been enough, because hip hop, you know, mid 80s or whatever truly takes form, or early 80s, and then it grows in different ways. And I think now it's coming to a point where you can analyze it because there's been enough like time to look back and like, you know, catalog it in certain ways. And, you know, even for like Kanye to have a documentary out about himself, like that's, you know, 2004 is only 20 years ago. It sounds like a long time, but it's not in the grand scheme of what it is. And he started really in 1998, 99 with his mixtapes and all that. So it's just interesting. It's just all of it. It's just so, I look frustrated about it because there's a certain amount of frustration I feel because I don't know if it's age bias, like I call it like a prime time bias when you're like 14, 15, 16 and like you have this music that molds you, and you know, I'm sure everyone is subject to it.
Of course.
But like I know there's a lot of people that feel the same way I do when I go and I comment on posts on Instagram and I'm like, why can't music still be like this? You know, like pop hits, 08, 09, 2010, like absolute bangers, and like T-Pain's dominating the airwaves. Like, I'm not gonna say it's the best hip hop, but I'm saying it's very entertaining, good hip hop at the end of the day. And there's room for that, and there's room for very creative hip hop. But like, it seems like we're losing kind of both in a weird way. There's like, creativity is going down, and mainstream is taking a different form. I don't know any better way to describe it, but
yeah,
I wanted like a time machine to take me back, you know, like that just, it's hard. It's a hard thing to grapple with, especially when we're talking about it in the capacity that we are.
Yeah.
And
I almost have a due diligence to like put it out there for, you know, half of my viewers are, you know, 13 to 17, 18, and they're just missing out, unfortunately.
Right. But at least they're open enough to listen to a podcast about it or watch a podcast about it that's going to educate them a little more. And I think you nailed it. The problem is the history. Like there's a thing back in the day, like maybe I you know, when I got into rap, it was very early 90s, but like I you know, listened to NWA and I listened to some Public Enemy and things like that. But I was like, oh, I kind of missed the boat. Sometimes if you weren't there, it's hard to kind of catch up on it. But we had a respect for the history. And that's what I think is missing. And that's what you're touching on. Like, if they don't want to know that Kanye inspired Drake, and then Kanye was inspired by blah blah blah, and all these different people were around. Like, how do you know? Like, you have to understand where things came from. Even craft beer, when I'm getting into that, I had to learn about where everything came from. I'm just not a purist because I've only been into it 12, come up 13 years. Like, there's people I know that I talk to been in it for 20, 30 years.
Right.
Which I have with rap. So I'm hella biased with what I am with rap. And that other purists in beer think, no, beer has to be clear and it's got to be this way. And now there's all this like funky new stuff that they get mad at. And I'm like, oh, this is the same as music. Like,
you're in the same thing.
Yeah, I'm like, it's just I'm the old guy yelling at the new kids not to do that. So it's like, it's just because I have a healthy respect for where it came from. And I got to live a pretty decent chunk of where it came from and be there in real time when it changed. And there was a point where just all of a sudden I'm like, I'm not fucking with this stuff anymore. Like, whatever's happening, I'm just going to keep listening to the other things or continue to try and dig for other, things that actually work for me. And that got progressively harder over time to the point where it's like, what do you even do at this point? Like,
it's like you got to put in a certain effort to even find what you're looking for. And then it just kind of discourages you. You're like, there's all this stuff out here, and like it's not like sounds like Drake on any tab. It's not like there's none of that anymore where it's like, oh, if you like him, you'll love this guy, and then there's like there's no forum for it anymore.
No.
So that's why I love doing the research and going back and analyzing, because it's like then you can learn and then you can see. You can like widen your gaze a little bit, which is a hard thing which it should be easier than ever to widen your gaze now because of all the information we have readily available.
But I think that's the sort of the lie of the digital era. Like, everyone's like, oh, it's going to be so much easier. Think about it, like we're making music for the first time and ready to put it out and say like 02. So what do? There's no Spotify, there's no YouTube, there's no SoundCloud, there's no TuneCore distributor, there's nothing. So I'm like,
go to the mall and hand out demos. Like, how else do you get people to listen to your stuff?
Like, there's nothing.
And give like, hey, can you put this in there? And if it sells, then give me the $5. And if not, then cool. Like, what are you gonna do? You shoot a music video, then what? Like, you had
put it
right, but now it's gone. And then when I discovered MySpace, it was the greatest thing on earth because you could put your music there, you could talk to people and network, and it was just crazy. And then SoundCloud, and then YouTube, and so on and so forth. But then now it's like it's that on crack. It's so big, and there's so much noise. Breaking through as an artist is next to impossible. And then now we were talking like as a fan, trying to discover new stuff is so difficult. It's almost like you need what it has done. Now I think about it, it's made personal recommendations probably the most valuable way of discoverability. Because now we know we share a lot of the same interests. If you're like, bro, you like this guy, I'd be like, I'll note it down and I'll check them out because somebody that I trust and that I know shares the same taste as me will, not going to steer me wrong. So I was like, you know what I mean? So maybe that's a good thing. It brings us back. It's like going full circle back to community again. Yeah. If you look at it like that, where like now it's more one-to-one, like, yo, bro, you need to check this guy out, check this chick out, whatever. Like, and you're going to action it because now I'm like, well, if I don't do that, I'm just going to go dig through Discover Weekly or Release Radar, and there's going to be a whole bunch of garbage in there anyway. So might as well listen to something that somebody thinks I'll like it. And you know me well enough to be like, oh, I need to share this with somebody that I think will like it.
It's share worthy. That's like how sharing started on social media. You just did it in person. Like
look at this. Like, I like it.
I think you're right. Like in a lot of ways, you know what? It might turn into like book club. It might just turn into like physical gather. Like it could come full circle enough to where it's just, we're kind of doing it. I mean, we're just doing it virtually. It's just, it's bizarre. That's essentially what podcasts have become, is just a new form book club of just common interests and just getting together with people that think the same way or talk the same way.
Hell yeah. That's a great way to listen.
Do you have all that being said, like, do you have like a Drake project that stands out in the biggest way to you, or that you still listen to on the regular, or just like the most? Is it, you said So Far Gone before? I don't know if it's that, but
nothing was the same for me. That was like the end of when I feel like he sort of went downhill mostly for me from there. I didn't, you know what, strangely enough, and this is a weird take, a hot take, I didn't really like Take Care. I don't like love singing Drake. Like, it's okay.
Yeah.
I came into him and '08 with comeback season. So to me, that's what I want to hear. I want to hear the bars
Right.
because I know he can rap. That's what will piss me off when people always say Drake isn't good. I'm like, no, fucking listen. Like, same as Wayne. They used to say Wayne wasn't good. I had to defend Wayne with everything, and Kanye too. So I feel like I've always liked maybe underdog.
Maybe it's an underdog story for you. Yeah.
Maybe it is, but yeah, nothing was the same with Sick. I thought Worst Behavior is brilliant. There's just so many. Like, Tuscan Leather is probably one of the sickest intros of all time.
Yeah, it's phenomenal.
So like to me, that would probably be my favorite. The most maybe impactful might have been Comeback Season because it was the first exposure. But
Sure.
I think kind of you alluded to it. Like there's some of those songs, it was just mixtape. It was just verses over beats. It wasn't
like 25 songs on there, just trying to get it out. Like
exactly. It's just him as a collection of stuff he'd done. He's like, I'm gonna put this out.
Yeah.
And
See what
nothing was the same. Yeah, and he'd sort of like, and because he's ascent. I mean, maybe to him it was slow, but publicly it was quick.
Oh yeah.
So then Thank Me Later didn't particularly love. Thought that was pretty mid.
Yeah.
Take Care just wasn't for me. I felt like that was just it didn't resonate with me. But then nothing was the same. Even like Pound Cake and like all those joints were just like
It's just bars. He lays down heavy bars. Yeah.
and it was just more like him coming back. It was almost like the Scary Hours like flip, even though Take Care was actually received incredibly well.
There's a certain kind of power in Nothing Was the Same, I think, and that's why like you just really want to like run through a wall a little bit more with that project than anything he'd done prior.
Yeah,
you know, because Take Care is more of like I love Take Care because I like singing Drake. I like Break Up With Your Girlfriend Drake. I love like the soppy, like, you know, like for something about it, I just like it. It just draws me in. So anything that's like slow, I call it slow kush Drake is what it is. You know, it's just like that slow bumping goodness. I love it. But stuff you can listen to alone, not stuff that you like listen to at the party, where like you see more of that on a Nothing Was the Same project for sure. So I understand, and that's why I like to ask. I really should prompt it in that way. It's like which do you like better, Take Care or Nothing Was the Same, and that'll just tell me what kind of person you are in hip hop in the way you view music. Because they're not the same, not even close to the same. You know,
no, very different. You're right. That's actually the optimal or ultimate Drake question to know where you stand. And I think that's why I don't like For All the Dogs, because there's too much of these, like sort of the drone singing.
Yeah,
like, I think that's dope, and it's almost like he started it. Maybe Kanye did, but Drake could actually hold a tune.
Yeah,
It's like becomes too much at a time. I don't mind it in pieces, like, you know, say on November 18th off So Far Gone, like that is perfection, because like that first verse, he's doing the singing thing. It's incredible.
Get a little bit of everything. Yeah.
Right. But that's I feel like it's got to be used properly. I feel like there's a bunch of people like say Ari Lennox, I think is great. I think her voice is very specific and she keeps doing songs that it doesn't work for her voice. And she needs people to write the song. Like the lyrics are super corny a lot of the time. I'm like, she's too good for that. And you just need to not know your lane, because as an artist, you don't ever want to be put in a box, but just understand what sort of works best. But I feel like, say, For All the Dogs, slow joints just really, and they were boring, and it was the same stuff. So for me, it doesn't work. I don't think Take Care is boring, though. It's just, I should probably revisit it, to be fair. I think it's probably time I do now with all of this context. It's just like, you know, Marvin's Room and stuff is obviously like great songs, and you hear people and you have a whole stadium singing every word, right? So obviously there's something I'm missing. It's not like I'm correct here. It's just
truthfully, at the end of the day, the slow jams they're risky. They slow down an album. If you're listening to an album cover to cover, it just slows the tempo. If you don't place them right, then you lose people. If you put too many together, then that's a whole nother side of just album construction. That's a big thing that artists, me as a consumer, I don't think of it as much, but as an artist, that's probably where you spend most of your time after the songs are said and done. Album construction's got to be a huge thing. You could
tell me more about that, about how you look at it, man.
That's a great point. We have like a reverse bell curve, I call it. So like you start off with the bangers, and then you like slowly get slower in the middle and try not to peak it too long. And you sort of like bookend the slower songs with like, you know, something a little faster, and then just go back up and you finish with a bang. And I find that's the best sort of journey to take somebody on a project. Like anything we've ever done, that's what the intention's always been, in like shuffling the tracks. And I find that just sort of works well, because it starts with that high energy, and then you can kind of take that dip for a second and then come back up. But say For All the Dogs had like slow songs like peppered throughout.
He was like up and down. Yeah.
Yeah, and it wasn't. Yeah, exactly. It was like this little roller coaster thing. You know, just
Right.
it brought. You're right. It brought it down. Now, I just want to also clarify. Like, I definitely bangs with slow songs. Like, I'm not.
Oh yeah, no.
Like,
I
Neo
get that.
Soul was my jam. D'Angelo is one of my favorite artists of all time. Like, you know, I listen to a lot of, and Mary J. Blige, My Life is also one of my other favorite albums of all time.
Sure.
Like, it's mostly slow. So
Yeah.
I don't have a problem with it. I just feel like because I like Drake, he can rap so well that it almost feels like I'm opportunity cost. Like, oh man, you could be
Like,
rapping
you should
this
be
other
doing
stuff.
more of
Yeah.
this. Yeah.
But at the same token, like you said earlier, that's probably the secret to his success, because no one did it as well as him in the way that he did it. Even though Kanye did it before him in a kind of like a more casual way, and Fonte been doing it, but Fonte was like rappity rap with Little Brother and then singing with Foreign Exchange, so he kind of like separated it, where Drake was like, all right, let's put it together.
We could do it all in one bunch. Yeah,
Do it all
exactly.
together. So, yeah.
And that's what's interesting, because too, when you think about, I mean, say when So Far Gone came out, and So Far Gone's a lot of like, I was actually just I'm doing an episode on So Far Gone. Actually, I'm filming it tomorrow. Fun fact. So for me, I was reviewing this album. I'm looking at it, and you know, I've listened to it 100 million times. It's like, I have a bootleg vinyl, the whole thing, and I'm looking at it like this, like, no, there's no bangers on this album. It's just, it's Best I Ever Had. It's the only one that got radio play. And then you have a lot of slow, the whisper stuff, the singing stuff. November 18th, he's like rapping, but it's like subdued. And
Say You Will, he's chill too.
Say You Will just is on another level, and it's like, but it's just so different. So when you look at that, which it's interesting, because 40 goes on record talking about how much 808s and Heartbreaks influenced So Far Gone, which I think is so cool. I love when people publicly put that out there, because we don't have to speculate, right?
Yeah.
And you can clearly see how similar the albums are. But a lot of people don't like 808s and Heartbreaks for some reason. I think a lot of people,
Ahead of its time.
way ahead of its time, and that's kind of Kanye's common theme, I think, in a lot of ways. And then he got what was his when Beautiful Fantasy came out. That's where he got his, and he just like met ahead of his time, right where the time needed it, I think, in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
So, but a lot of that just constantly, the fact it took him so long to get the College Dropout produced was obviously ridiculous, and then goes on to win all the Grammys and all that. So it's cool for me to see at least like consistency in that way, where like at least people who are, don't like 808s also don't like So Far Gone. There's direct connection, correlation, again, back to the rap history of things in general. So, to circle around again, I asked you about Drake, but if you're going to go Kanye on your favorite productions of his, give me like a top three, and why, if you want to do it that way. Because I know Kanye's so different. You can just go albums.
Okay, yeah, Kanye is very different to Drake. So,
or even in Kanye's own discography, like he makes so much different music. I know it's hard to pick kind of one.
I got it. It's easy for me to do it. So like, because of the how much College Dropout is my number one, and always will be, because of the time period when it came out, because of, like I mentioned earlier, when I got to actually buy it, and we listened to all the leaks, which inspired the first major project that I ever did as an artist and stuff. So to me, I can never front on that. It's perfection to me. Fantasy would be the second, but I also acknowledge that I think there's a big call. Fantasy might be the best album of all time, period, across all genres, potentially. And then third would be Jesus is King, which it used to not be. I don't even know what it would have been, but it grew into it. My girlfriend started playing the Sunday Service album a lot, just in the mornings and stuff, and I was like, fuck, this is a jam. And then she started, and it would just go and play Jesus is King afterwards. I'm like, yo, this slaps. And neither of us are, once again, not religious, and that's what turned me off in the beginning, because it just felt like a Christian album. But then the production is fire, the melodies are great, the concepts are awesome. Like it's just so fire. So I'd say that would be my top three for Kanye. What was your top three for Kanye? What would be your top Drake too?
For Kanye, it's I struggle. You know what? His music is so tough for me, because it's the most that I waver on. Like it's almost fluid, my top three, because I go in like waves with his music a little bit. Like so it's kind of fluid, but generally I'll go as for my favorite. I always come back to Graduation, just because, again, I'm like right coming into high school, and it's playing everywhere, and it's stadium music. Like it's in a different. He made it to play in big arenas and stuff like that. He engineered it in such a way that it was awesome, and I still play so much of the music today and listen to it all the time. But for me, I love. It's hard. Graduation goes 1. My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy has to go 2, just because it's so on its own right. It's so amazing. I listened to a podcast. I don't know if you've listened to the Dissect podcast with Cole Kushner.
Sounds familiar.
Oh, I'll send you the link, because
Yeah.
what this guy does on album breakdowns and analysis is incredible. Like, he's a music guy, composer and stuff like that. And he does a full analytic breakdown, like line by line with the entendres. Like, it's incredible. Like, it's so much work. I'll send it over to you because you'll love it. And he does that with a bunch of different albums. But so I listened to that. I had already known the album, but then I listened to his analysis, and I'm like, oh my God, like I got to go re-listen to this album. And then you listen to stuff in such a different context. So that got me there with that production. And then after I then watched the Kanye documentary that went out on Netflix, which I thought was really great in a lot of ways. I didn't like the third part, but the first 2 parts I thought were great, because that's so much I didn't know about Kanye and his upcoming and how he came to be. So after that, I started listening to College Dropout a ton, like an insane amount. So for me, and before that, I would say that's my number 3's College Dropout. Before that, 808s and Heartbreaks was right there with me too, because that's like I said, it's a sadder kind of like, he's doing the auto-tune when auto-tune was getting really big. And he did it really well in a time when it was very saturated, which was, I think, even more impressive. But for me, that's probably my hierarchy for Kanye. And even with his new projects that come out, I'm just trying to give him the benefit of the doubt. Like, I want him to make really good music, and I want to hear more of it and all of that, But like when Donda came out, I was upset, because that's not what I was looking for, I guess,
in what I was expecting from him.
I know people like Donda, and I know but for me, it's just pretty mid. Like, it was there, it got the job done of what do you think, commercially and everything that you want to do with it, but it just wasn't my bag, unfortunately. Maybe it's time to re-listen on that as well.
It could be worth it. Donda definitely resonates well whenever I jump back. Now, to be fair, I agree with you to a degree as far as like there is some pretty mid songs on there, but when the ones hit, when they hit, they hit. Like, there's some bangers on that album that are just like Off the Grid and Jail, and like a whole bunch of joints that are like I feel like he uses the newer artists that we both aren't into quite well. Like, I can't stand Playboy Cardi, but I think is he on Jail? He's on one of what's it? I can't even remember, but he's on one of the joints. I'm like,
works. Yeah, like I can get
behind it.
I feel like that's the one thing. I feel like Kanye, okay, that's a good comparison. Kanye works with the newer artists. He's always kind of just been with the times. And I feel like he's brought them into his world. So he's like, he could just be making College Dropout over and over and over again, but he's not. He's working with newer producers and
choosing not to purposefully.
Correct. Right. And he's mentioned that as well, right? And then you look at Drake, and the reason I think For All the Dogs was weak was he is too good to be coming down to the level of the newer artists, whereas he's like 38 or something like that, whatever he is. And without saying, I just mean, like, don't act like you're 21. Like, you're not, dude. Like, you've been around, you've done this. You don't have to, like, Yachty's fine or whatever, but you don't have to come down. He's 25 or something. So you don't have to.
He's bringing himself down and associating younger to stay young. You don't need to do that. Like, it's fine.
Exactly. Bring them to your level, because you're Drake, dude. Like,
elevate them. Don't hang out with Lil Yachty just because you can. Like, it's just weird.
Exactly, it is weird because that's a pretty big age difference, but also like you're not that, and it seems like an old man trying to hang on to his youth or something at some point if that keeps going. Like, whilst he's very young looking and like does he whatever, but I don't know. It's starting to be like pandering as opposed to like, what do you want to do, Drake? What music do you want to make? Because you went and did Scary Hours, and I'm like, that was like damn near flawless, like cool. So you clearly want to be able to do that stuff, and you do the other thing. There's ways you've done better before. It's just like, I feel like Kanye just works with the newer artists a lot better across.
Like, he knows how to, like, they're tools to him, and he knows how to use them because he like does his homework. He analyzes them. He like, when they talk about how he made Beautiful Fantasy, he like engineered every part of that project. Like, he created it from the ground up. They didn't get like sent a pack of beats and then he like made music. Like, he made it. He flew people in specifically for their sound, and everything he put into it, it's like miraculous what he did in such a high level. And yeah, it was the most expensive album ever made or whatever. Like, who cares? He doesn't care. You know, he's like interested in making the best music possible. Lucky for us, that best music he made aligned with the times in a very poignant way.
Yes.
Where, like you said, he's usually ahead of the curve of what he makes, which is the hard part about him. But in those situations, it rewards the work that he does, which I'm hoping for it more in the future. That's all.
Let's try to stay positive, you know. If they can get it out, they're saying New Year's Eve at this point. So for Vultures, so we'll see.
Well, he's historically good at pushing his stuff back. So
changing his mind. They said Nicki didn't clear her verse for New Body.
Yeah, I saw that.
Which was, I don't know, weird. It's been out for a while, but I thought it had been out as like a leak, not like this official release or whatever. So I don't know what she's like talking about, where she's like, oh, that's been.
Well, even him not clearing the NSYNC stuff, it's like, why aren't you clearing your stuff?
That also is like, what are you doing exactly? So I feel
like that's an easy thing. Maybe he doesn't the money because it's a good song. Who cares? Like, just figure it out for the sake of good music, which he is all about, just making good music.
Yeah.
So it's frustrating to see, and I don't know if it's a marketing play. I don't know. You know, you never know at this point what is real and what's not. You know, pushing stuff back because of production or because they want to hype it up. Whatever. You know, like, you never know what these guys are thinking. They're very tight knit. Their team, like, there used to be like gossip. Like, there's no like real gossip the same way that there used to be, like with these cruiser guys, and there was no like scuttlebutt. You know, it doesn't. It's not the same capacity. Like, you don't, like, I see stuff online and it's like
hearsay as opposed to this person from the crew came and said,
right. So I can't attribute what to that, but that part of hip hop made it fun too. But hopefully they can change for the better as hip hop grows and goes into a positive direction more than anything.
For sure.
And just to answer your question before, also just for the Drake albums, I
just wanted to say,
this is another thing. It's just like I've revisited a couple of albums recently because we've talked about how his recent works aren't so solid as they were in the past. So that gets me going back to some of his other projects like More Life and Views and If You're Reading This It's Too Late. And to me, at a certain point, those were like kind of mid. They were like, this is good. Like, I can get with this. Some of those albums, he goes very pop, and then some of it doesn't, and then not enough bars. So some of them, like More Life, is very poppy, but you know, I come back to a project like Views and I'm like, well, this is actually really great. And I come back on it and I'm like, this is, I might be underrating this project as it is, which is half the fun of revisiting projects. So, but this is another one I struggle with too, because you got to look at it, you know, in regards to like how you talk about the College Dropout, right? So Take Care comes out and I'm a sophomore in high school, so I'm 15. It's prime time, right? And I knew Drake as a radio guy. You know, he played radio hits. I didn't know like his full works yet.
Right.
So from there, Take Care comes out and I'm like, oh, this is awesome. Like, I'm playing it. I'm bumping it on YouTube because that's the only place you could find it. And it would get like taken down, re-uploaded, and you have to find a new playlist. And because there was no other I wasn't buying music. I never bought music off iTunes, nothing like that. Right. But I would buy physicals when I could, but iTunes adds up fast for $1.30 a song. Right.
Oh yeah.
So Take Care comes out, and then I'm like, oh, what are these other songs? And it's like, Thank Me Later. And then what are these other songs? And it's like, So Far Gone. So for me, I got all three of them packaged like at once because I discovered all this other music that wasn't on the radio. And then for a long time, I didn't even know what was on what because I just like knew the song from the song because it was just like random Lucy's on the side of the YouTube recommended. Right. So we would scroll through it, send them to my buddies, and we that we didn't have, you know, I missed like the blog era. I didn't get into the mixtape era as much, but so like for me, that was like my way of finding new music and getting into music, and his features and stuff and his new Lucy's would always get just YouTube, and I'd go find them and just bump them, and I'd make like a playlist on my browser. Like, that's all I had. So, and then I started just ripping stuff and, you know, YouTube to MP3 converter kind of stuff. So for me, I got spoiled because I got so much good music at once, and it was like fresh and had the features and had every bit of Drake was in all those projects. But that's a long way to say is like I always come back to Take Care as my number one for me, and I just could listen it end to end endlessly. Like, I could just keep it on repeat, and that's fine. And then second up would be Nothing Was the Same, because I love everything that Nothing Was the Same does, because I think it builds on a lot of what Take Care does. And it adds to it in all the capacities that it needs to. And then my 3 spot I always struggle with, again, because it ends up being like So Far Gone versus, at this point, it's So Far Gone versus like Views. Because Views is another one that has a lot of like slow stuff. It's got a lot of rapping. It's a little longer, so there's a little more to work with, which is nice. And I think he just knocks it out of the park. There's a couple of stinkers on it, which is the only thing I give it. Like there's 2 or 3 songs I would hard cut off of that album, where like So Far Gone I wouldn't cut anything. So that's why I go back and forth between like a Views or sometimes What a Time to Be Alive. Like I like some of these projects a lot. I'm sorry, not What a Time. If you're reading this, is too late.
Yeah.
That's also an excellent, and that's a mixtape.
Really?
It's mixtape, but it's not. It might as well be an album. But that one I go back. Those 3 just shuffle around pretty much. Views, What a Time. I'm sorry. If you're reading this, it's too late.
Yeah.
And So Far Gone. Those ones all bop around for my top 3, but they're it's fun. It's fun to revisit the stuff. I like that the time has passed because it's like the music changes for me, you know, like obviously like music is formative and like you said, it gets burned in to a certain degree, but the more I listen to the same music, the more it kind of like changes, like, you know, like I'll like from like job to job almost. Like I've had a couple of full-time jobs and sometimes it reminds me of like driving to work at that job and then, you know, so on and so forth. So it's cool how music can be so different for everybody and everyone's experiences are different, feelings are different, and everyone just kind of programmed differently in that way.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. I think it's really what people can take from all of this, I guess, is to revisit stuff. It seems to be like a really important thing. And I mentioned earlier on that sort of thing, I'm listening to fall back in love with making music. I've been going back from the very beginning of my own stuff. And because it's like some of it's 20 years old or whatever, it's almost like it's not me. Like you're listening to it like from a third party perspective.
You change so much in general, right?
Yeah, I'm like, oh, so it still puts me in a place, just like you said, this album reminds me of going to this job and blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. Just like that does. It's talking about particular parts of my life, and you remember, it's the same emotions, though, as listening to someone else's music as listening to your own. Sure. And I'm only up to, I think, 2013 now. We put out a lot of music. So I'm like slowly, and my brother's stuff, so slowly working through it. And really enjoyed the process. So it's the same thing you're talking about. So it's like if people are into people like Kanye or Drake who have an extensive catalog, just go back to the beginning and just do it in like
just run it up
in order and you see the growth of that person. You're like, oh, I remember when I heard this song. And you forget the songs. Like it's all good to look at the track list.
Yeah.
But you don't know until you play it. You really got to listen to it.
100%. The experience is different. I mean, music is experiential in every way, and we might have lost some of that experience, like we said, like in the physical capacity, but you're never going to lose the emotional capacity of music. There's just no way around it.
No, that's the core of what it is, really. And it's been a cool experience. So I'm looking forward to doing that. I always front on Views, and Dan, the 25-year-old's always telling me Views is sick. I'm like, I just got to go back. And I didn't like Future at the time, like aggressively didn't like Future. When
me too.
What's the code again? You mentioned like 3 times. What a Time to Be Alive. Yeah. So I'm like, I got to go back and just recheck it because it's probably not as bad as I have in my head.
Yeah.
And, you know, maybe I'm thinking Take Care is boring, but I'll listen to it and be like, yo, this slaps. So I just need to I think I'm going to keep this up going through old stuff once I finish going through my own music. And then I'm going to do the same thing because it just seems like I don't know, particularly if you're jaded with what's up today, just you need to remind yourself that, great music exists and you can listen to
plenty of it. Yeah.
Plenty of it. It doesn't always have to be new, and you can go and revisit some of the stuff that's really cool. And maybe that'll inspire you to look at some other artists or something and could take you in a whole other direction.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool exercise. Yeah, man.
100%. Dude, you've been a great guest. I really appreciate you having you on to be my inaugural guest. I mean, tell me a little bit about your hip hop podcast and what you got going on there and what you guys do there and what's it about. Can you tell me a little bit about it?
Yes, sir. So we started it. It's called Bad Habits with my brother Notion and Dan, and that was May 2020. So we just released episode 148 last night, which is like the end of year wrap up. So we just wanted it to be like, to me, it was like, well, I wanted to. I listen to a lot of podcasts, and I'm like, well, if we're not putting out like a ton of music, like around the pandemic time, maybe we were slowing down with the volume that we were doing. So I was like, well, now we can talk about it. I listen to new music and stuff all the time. So why don't we just talk about it? I got a lot of opinions. Like I know my brother does. I know Dan does when he moved. He's from England, so he moved over here as well. And it's something we just just the three of us, and usually it's me and my brother versus Dan arguing about Drake. Typically,
That's what it boils down to.
Basically, that's a lot lately, and also me hating on soccer because he loves soccer, so it's easier. That's the buttons to push. So it's always really funny. But yeah, man, we're just messing around. Going through hip hop culture stuff and just trying to sort of give some different perspectives and different takes than what you would probably hear on a lot of the larger sort of rap podcasts and stuff like that. A lot of them have been in the industry and stuff, and we're coming from like an independent artist perspective.
Sure.
And also it's cool to have like a couple like older millennials plus Gen Z. So it's like a nice little rounded balance to kind of, he keeps us in check and vice versa. And we're teaching him stuff as well. So that's, man, that's been like a lot of fun just talking about rap more, and it kind of just keeps it front of mind for me. Otherwise, like, it's, if you don't make the music all the time, which is just not the reality of it, like you do it when you can or when you feel like it, it's allowed me to sort of like just think about music a lot more and talk and just sort of express how I feel about it, and then kind of almost be forced to listen to new stuff so that we can talk about it, which is good. Sometimes you need that push to do it. So yeah, man, it's a lot,
That's
a lot
great.
of fun.
I like the way you think about the content and what you're doing, because like I think in this, when you're doing it, it's kind of hard to get wrapped up and you get like taking it like with the planning. Like I get really serious with this, and I gotta do this on this day, and I gotta plan it, and I gotta do it. But you're like keeping it what it is. Like it's still a conversation. It's still, it's still interaction. It's you having a good time with people that are like-minded, which is all that podcast really should be at the end of the day. So it's cool that you guys are really like doing it because you love it, because that otherwise, we were talking about it before, this stuff doesn't hold up if you don't love doing it. You don't love talking about it because, it's a lot of work. So if you don't love it, it's just not gonna stick, unfortunately.
That's it. People can hear that passion or lack thereof. And when you start phoning it in and you're just sort of not even caring, they're just like going to tune out. And it's hard enough to get any traction anyway. Like podding is easier than making music. I think there's 3 million podcasts, but then you mentioned the stat earlier that most pods don't even make it to episode 6. I think it was, right?
Yeah, episode 8, I think it was.
Episode 8, okay. So either way, single digits, right? So like, we're 148. So it's like, it's been going for a decent amount of time. We try and be consistent. Obviously, we've missed some. Sometimes you take holiday breaks and blah blah blah, but it's it just keeps that passion going, and it's fun to just kind of talk about it. And it's also that pod, we were talking about this off air, but we don't really we have had guests in the past when we first started. Then we kind of just like, it's just a bit easier to just have it's sort of not formatted to say, it's not a problem to have it, but just like we wanted to not replicate, but kind of do the same type of thing as like Joe Budden and them do, or when they just have their
chopping it up.
Their immediate crew just chopping it up. Everyone starts to know the host, as opposed to say the beer podcast, which is a set that I'm in, that is a guest-based podcast almost exclusively. Like I don't do episodes by myself ever. Right. I've got a co-host in Ottawa, and otherwise my girlfriend often joins me as well. So we would, if we're going to do that, but more times I'd say like 80-90% of the time it's a guest. So to me, it's kind of cool because the conversations with somebody different, super fun, and you learn about somebody. And I feel like I know a lot about beer, but like, not because I'm good, because I talk to smarter people than me. So I get to pick the brains of all of these people who know all of this stuff. So I just learn about it by osmosis and asking questions, because that's the format that I've got. Whereas like the music podcast, I get to just yap with the boys, and I know how they all feel about things, and we can make jokes, and like, so just have fun.
Poke their buttons a little bit, and
he does it we do it to all poke each other's buttons, and just it's just like, it's fun. And then there's funny moments that come from that, and it's a different experience. So like podcasting is the best. I love it more than anything. Like it's so fun.
It is a fun experience. And I'm jealous of you, because like when I started this, it's like I wanted to kind of start it with a couple of buddies of mine, and they get a little shy, or they don't want to, it's hard enough to get a couple people together to talk. It's really, really hard, truthfully.
Tell me about it. That's why we went to guest based. I used to have a co-host, and then people started to want to be on, and they started reaching out. And then he just wasn't able to do it. We lived in different cities, and then we weren't doing it remote at the time. And in the end, it was like, well, I could just be the host and just have guests, and that's fine. And then it worked out kind of even better. So it was like one of those things where the more you do it, and you're super early in, I think you're 10-ish episodes.
Right? We're under 10 right now. Yeah.
Under 10. Perfect. You just said that at the beginning. So like, the more you, congrats on 10 episodes. It's the first milestone. Very cool. The more you do it, the more opportunities will come your way, and then people will reach out, or you'll have an idea, or maybe you have like a semi-regular guest that comes on and kind of almost acts like a co-host sort of thing. And that's how my current co-host started. I do some myself, but if he wants to be on, he just started feeling just wanting to join during the pandemic, and then did it so much that he was like, yo, I want to be the co-host. I'm like, sweet. So it just kind of organically happened, you know? So I feel like that's usually the more you do it, and as you build the audience and meet different people, you know, things can sort of pan out. And that's the beauty of them, because there's you don't be romantic about the format or anything like that. Like, you keep true to like the ethos of it and stuff, but like you can just like, hey, if an opportunity comes up to switch things up a bit, keeps it fun for you, fun for the audience. I don't know.
Yeah,
it's
100%, man.
Odds are the best.
Well, we've been going for a little bit here, and I appreciate your time, man. It's been great. Hopefully, we'll be able to do something, you know, again in the future. If we can, you know, like an anniversary date or something, we can get together, do another episode, or whatever works, man. That'd be great. I appreciate all your time, and this has been a great conversation, and I'm excited to get it going again.
Likewise, man. Thank you for having me. Keep killing it. And yes, I'd love to do it. Let's just keep in touch, man. I'm excited to see to follow along and see how things go as you start to do more conversations like this and start to sort of dig into other artists and stuff. It's very cool. You're in for a journey, brother.
Thank you, Craig. I appreciate it, man.
Appreciate you, my guy.